Kid. Oh, it's been recorded.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Chester Library. Once again, I'm always excited to have Evan Weiner with us. Evan is one of our most popular speakers, and of course, we're celebrating International Women's Day and month, and I thought it'd be great for Evan to give us one of his incredible talks. So, with that, please know this session will be recorded and available on the Chester Library YouTube account. And Evan will share his personal information as he does tons of libraries, and he'll be back at Chester once again. But thank you all. And if everyone could place themselves on mute. And at the end of this session, Evan is always delighted to take questions. So with that, I'll turn it over to Evan.
Okay, thank you, Donella, and thank you for spending some time with me on this gorgeous day in almost spring in the New York City area. Hope everybody is well. My name is Evan Weiner. I've been doing this type of thing since 1971. I was in high school when I first got on radio on WRKL in Mount Ivy, New York, about 30 miles north of Midtown Manhattan. I happen to know that guy. I'll tell you how I knew him. Dick Nixon. He was the arbitrator of the Major League Baseball umpires dispute, 1985. Got to go up in his office. I even sat in his chair and went, because he wasn't there. I had to do it. So did Gene Orza and Arthur Shack, who were with me. We all sat in the chair. If we had a cell phone, we'd all have pictures like that from 1985. He knew my name. I knew his name. That was 1985, and I dealt with him over a 4 or 5 year period. Before I start, I have to thank some people who helped me out immensely with this particular talk. You might have heard of some of these people. Billie Jean King, who I interviewed over the years about Title IX in her career. Donna DeVerona, who is a friend of mine, lives up in Connecticut, who won 2 gold medals in the 1964 Summer Olympics in Tokyo. Nancy Hogshead Maker, who is now teaching law over at Rutgers University. She won one gold medal in the 1984 Olympics in swimming in Los Angeles. My old buddy Harvey Schiller, who had run the Southeast Conference Athletic Conference with the NCAA back in the 80s and 90s, and the late Shelley Saltman, one of my best friends, who was actually the promoter of the Bobby Riggs, Billie Jean King network TV extravaganza, narrated by somebody else I knew rather well, Howard Cosell, and I'm still friendly with Howard's grandsons, Colin and Justin. Justin is a principal at a charter school up in Stamford, Connecticut. This guy, Richard Nixon, of all people, changed the lives of hundreds of millions of American women. You go back to 1972 with his signature. He made Title IX a reality. Title IX says that women can go to places for higher education, colleges and universities, and they have to get the same courses as men if they take federal funding, which didn't exist prior to 1972. Give you some examples of that. I have a friend by the name of Fran Cummings. She's in Hawaii. She's in her 80s. And she was the valedictorian of her school in Utah back in the mid-1950s, and aced all the tests. And she came from a long line of geologists in her family. And she wanted to be a geologist. And she went from place to place, college to college, looking to get into a school that had a good geology program. And one of the people that interviewed her said, Fran, you're great. You're absolutely great. You got great marks. You did well on your tests. You know your stuff inside out because your family is in geology or is in geology, but can't take you. This is about 1957. We can't take you. Well, why can't you take me? We can't take you. You're too pretty. And being that you're too pretty, if we go out on a dig, and we have to go out on digs as part of the curriculum, the guys are going to concentrate on you and not on the dig. So, we're sorry, you're very pretty, and because you're very pretty, you can't come to school here. She never did become a geologist. She did go for education, and she and her husband, Wes, were at a number of colleges throughout their careers. Wes was a professor, and she was also a professor, and she also headed up some science departments at various colleges she went to. If she was around after 1972, she wouldn't have that problem. But that was a problem prior to 1972. Officially, Title IX is called the Patsy T. Mink Equal Opportunity in Education Act. The Education Amendments of 1972 were Title IX. In 1971, the Hawaiian Congresswoman Patsy Mink and the Oregon Congresswoman Edith Green were given the chance in the House to get their bill onto the floor and eventually help other women pursue their dreams without gender discrimination. And it became law June 23rd, 1972. Now, the last time I was anywhere was in San Francisco in November of 2019. And one of the places I love to go to in San Francisco is on Fisherman's Wharf. And it's an old, literally, it's a working museum of old pinball machines, arcade machines, and Nickelodeons. And they work. They're very fragile, but they work. And one thing caught my eye, which I hadn't seen the previous times that I'd been there, which is about 9 times prior to this, was this machine. To be happy, see what every married woman must not avoid. And you put your nickel in there and they tell you what you got to do and to make your husband happy and all that. And there's a song that Jack Jones did in the 1960s where I think Sammy Kahn was a writer, where he said that, or he wrote that, hey, your husband is looking at attractive women, secretaries in the office. When he comes home, put on your makeup, put on a dress, look good, to distract him from the good-looking women in the office. That was pre-1960s or pre-1970 thinking, including that song sung by Jack Jones in the 1960s. June 23rd, 1972, Title IX of the Education Amendments is enacted by Congress, signed into law by Dick Nixon. The sponsors of Title IX are Indiana Democrat Senator Birchby, Edith Green, Oregon Democrat. Title IX prohibits sex discrimination in any educational program or activity receiving any type of financial aid. I don't know, is West Orange Library your competitor? I don't think they're a competitor, but I was there giving a talk in January of 2020 on the Super Bowl. And it was a Sunday afternoon, and the library opened at 12, and I got there about 11:45, and I was waiting outside for them to open up. And I noticed this plaque, West Orange Library, Public Library, Library Board of Trustees. Mrs. Simon J. Griffinger. She's the president, but she doesn't have a first name. She's Mrs. Simon. Samuel Cristiano has a name. Roger W. Doring, he has a name. Herbert J. Dwyer, he has a name, but Mrs. Alex J. Katz is Mrs. Alex J. Katz. James J. Sheeran, well, he's the mayor of the town. He had a name. Dr. Rexford S. Souter, he's the superintendent of schools. He had a name. William E. Lehman, architect, he had a name. It's funny, right after this, I went to Riverdale, spoke at the Riverdale Y, one of the last places I spoke live. And there was a woman who said afterwards to me, I'm depressed after watching this. I said, well, why are you depressed? She said, I didn't know I didn't have a name. Now I think of it, I didn't have a name. I was Mrs. Morris so-and-so. And you know, don't get me wrong, Morris was a good man. He was a good man. He was a good husband. He provided well, but I don't have a name because they used his name. And that was the way it was back in the day. Oh, you want to become a stewardess for Delta Airlines? Well, hey, check this out. 1965, you have the chance to become a stewardess. And this is an ad. Stewardess applications must be between 20 and 26 years old. Okay, I understand they want young women. Never married and in radiant good health. Never married. Never married. Okay, yeah, you're always in the air and you're always going place to place. That makes sense somewhat. Must adhere to strict figure control standards. Does that mean 34, 24, 34? Is that what that means? I think so. You have to have straight teeth. Better have a good orthodontist. And straight legs. You have to have straight legs. because the skirts are fairly short. Clear, smooth skin. Willing to retire between the ages of 30 and 32 to take on the greater complexities of marriage. Hey, those are the job specs. I don't think you could get away with that today. But back in 1965, you could get away with it. And then on TV, there's Alan Ludden, Password in the mid 1960s. I was watching some of those shows on Buzzer TV during the height of the pandemic. I didn't have anything to do. And here he is with Carol Burnett on the left and Mitch Miller, who lived in Rockland County on the right off of Route 202 in Pomona. And his house looked like a haunted house. Anyway, not far from the radio station I work for. Anyway, if a married woman happened to be a contestant on the show, Alan Ludden would say, "What does your husband do?" If a woman was single, he would say, "Are you a working gal?" Hey, that was par for the course in the 1960s. This is about 57 years ago. Password started in 1961, 62, so nearly 60 years ago. While this is all going on, that's Patsy Mink. And Patsy Mink probably faced more discrimination. Well, I shouldn't say more because it was John Lewis, but faced a good deal of discrimination getting to college or having a professional career. Patsy Mink was the valedictorian of her high school in 1944 in Maui, the island, nice island. Been there a few times, nice island. And she gets to Congress in 1965. Patsy Mink was elected the first female president of the student body at Maui High School. She was the valedictorian of her high school class in 1944. She also played basketball, but women's basketball going up and down a 96-foot court was just way too strenuous, way too strenuous. And so girls had to play 48-foot basketball. That's all they played, 48 foot, because after all, women are frail, dainty things. They're the weaker sex, right? This is the stereotype. Of course, Alan King, the old comedian, the late comedian, used to be on Ed Sullivan all the time, had this great routine. Yeah, they're the weaker sex, weaker sex. He said, he takes out a whole bunch of obituaries from the paper. Mrs. So-and-so, survive by. Mrs. So-and-so, survive by. All the widows, which always got me to thinking, if women are the weaker sex, how come the husbands die off younger? She went to law school after going to the University of Hawaii. She went on the mainland to high school. She remained politically ambitious. She was elected to the territory of Hawaii Senate in 1958, which was dissolved when Hawaii became a state. She decided to run for Congress in 1960 after Hawaii became a state in 1960, and she lost in the Democratic primary to Daniel Inouye. In 1962, she ran for election to the Hawaiian State Senate. She was successful in her bid. 2 years later, she ran for Congress and won. She was an early supporter of a successful effort to allow female members of Congress to use the all-male House gym. She was an athlete. She wanted to use the gym and she was denied, even though she was a member of Congress. She had to fight to get inside the House gym, even though she was a member of Congress. She was a champion of women's rights, but she did not want to be characterized as a feminist. She was an outspoken opponent of the Vietnam War. The legislation she worked on in the House included civil rights, including those of women and children, healthcare, welfare, and education. Now, she wanted to go to medical school. Sounds like Fran, who now lives in Honolulu. Sounds just like Fran. She applied to medical school, 12 rejections. 12 times they said no. And she believed that to be gender discrimination. So if she can't go to medical school, and I have a story about medical school and not Patsy Mink, but a number of years ago, I gave a talk up in Stanford at an adult residence. And I was talking about Patsy Mink. And this guy said, "Can I say something?" I said, "Sure," because I never stop anybody from saying something. And he said, "I went to medical school in 1960." And he said, there were 96 of us in that class, 92 women, 4 men. And we were all sitting in this auditorium, and the dean is there, and he tells the women, he said, the women in the class, can you please stand up? And they do. And he says, what are you doing here? Why are you here? Are you here to find a husband? Are you here to, you're taking a place of a man. You're taking a place of a man because probably you're here to find a husband. And what you want is a guy who's going to be a doctor, who's going to provide well for you. And you're wasting our time. You're wasting your time because none of you really want to be doctors. You want to be housewives. And the guy said before stuck it out in medical school, but that was their greeting to medical school, the dean of the school telling them, you don't belong here. You know, you're taking a place of a man. So anyway, she decides to go to law school, and she continued to face sexism. She graduates law school on the mainland, comes back to Maui, and there's a different set of problems now because she is now a married woman. And she didn't marry somebody from Hawaii. She married somebody from the mainland, from Chicago. And that becomes a major problem because she cannot take the bar exam. So she was denied a job at a law firm because she's a married woman, and she tried to start her own practice. But the government officials of Hawaii, prior to becoming a state, said, you can't take this bar exam. You just can't take it. Well, why? Was born here, went to high school here, went to college here. Oh, that's fine. But you're not a citizen here anymore. You know why? Well, you married a non-resident. You married a mainlander. So you're no longer a resident. You're a mainland resident. You're not going to college or to take a bar exam. So she goes to court and wins the right to take the bar exam. And she became the first Japanese American woman lawyer in Hawaiian history. She was a Hawaiian congresswoman from 65 to 77 and 90 to 2002. And there is Patsy Mink on the left and Edith Green on the right. In 1954, Edith Green was elected to the 3rd Congressional District in the state of Oregon. She basically, her whole career was based on women's issues, education, and social reform. In 66 years ago, in 1955, Edith Green proposed the Equal Pay Act, which would ensure that men and women were paid equally for equal work. A watered down version of that bill was signed into law by John Kennedy in 1963. There is still no equality in pay in the United States. Men still get paid more than women for the same job. And there is Edith Green, one of her campaign posters. Among the things that she did for libraries, she got money for rural libraries. And she was also part of the Higher Education Facilities Act of 1963, the Higher Education Act of 65 and 67. Her commitment to education, she got names, she got nicknames for it. She was the mother of higher education and Mrs. Education. I went to school, I graduated Spring Valley High School in 1973. I wasn't always in Rockland County, I was in New York City. And there were programs for boys after school in New York City. And also in Rockland County, but there were very few opportunities for girls to stay in school after school, clubs or whatever. Yeah, there was probably Girl Scouts, but that was somebody's house. In the late 1960s, Green noticed that, and she decided that girls should have programs as well. And she sought to correct the inequality, and she introduced a higher education bill that contained provisions regarding gender equality, equality or gender equity in education. Now take a look at this picture, take a real close look at this picture. That is Catherine Switzer. And this is the 1967 Boston Marathon. And that guy in the sport coat is looking to hit Catherine Switzer, knock her down, knock her out of the race, a female running in the Boston Marathon. And to me, this is almost assault. He doesn't get there because people around her are protecting her. And he's ready to push her down face first into the concrete. And that is her boyfriend, the guy on the left, the big looking guy who's 6'3", 235 pounds and a track and field athlete. and he's there also providing protection for her. Catherine Switzer was the first woman to run the Boston Marathon. She grew up as the daughter of a major in the United States Army. She was at Syracuse University in 1966, and she was an athlete. And she told one of her coaches that, you know what, I'm going to run the Boston Marathon. And the coach says, you're a fragile woman. Fragile women, all women are fragile. You can't run the Boston Marathon. You can't do that. Well, she said, I'm going to do it. So she enters the Boston Marathon, not as Catherine Switzer, but as Kay Switzer. Kay Switzer. So they didn't know that she was a woman, because if they knew she was a woman, she wouldn't have gotten her number to get in there. So she decides she's going to take off and race in the race. So she trains for the race in secret and gets there. And this is a closer picture of her boyfriend at the time, a nationally ranked track and field athlete, knocking Jock Stemple to the side. And she has a website, Catherine Switzer, and it's an interesting story if you read about the whole thing. Here's Semple trying to push her face first down, and the boyfriend knocks over Semple, and she's worried all of a sudden in the middle of the race, oh my God, he's going to be arrested for assault because he assaulted the guy, even though Semple wanted to assault her. Nothing ever happened of it, and she finished the Boston Marathon in 4 hours and 20 minutes, and read about it on her website. It's a fascinating story, the whole story, but it's so typical of her era, 1967. No person in the United States shall, on the basis of sex, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or subjected to discrimination under any education program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. Title IX of the Education Amendments of 1972. Now, you would think that it would be a no-brainer. Let women have the same educational opportunities than men. Be a no-brainer at all. But no, not at the time. You got to remember, at this time, there was the Virginia Slims commercial, you've come a long way, baby, to get to where you are today. You got your own cigarette now, baby. You've come a long way. This was the time of Betty Friedan, the time of Gloria Steinem, and the time of Billie Jean King, who were considered kind of out there and kind of dangerous because they wanted to change life. The Feminine Mystique, which is a book I'm sure you have in the library that Betty Friedan put out in 1963. This is all kind of dangerous stuff to some people. And there were people who supported the law, and there were others who thought it would be too dangerous forcing schools to accept women, and that would ruin American education. It just ruin it. You know, we got a quota for women in law, a quota for women in medicine. Be happy with it. And you know what? You could be a teacher, you could be a secretary, you could be a nurse, or you could be a telephone operator. In fact, you should be a telephone operator because there are no men who are telephone operators at the time. Here are the allies. Alaska Senator, the Republican, Uncle Ted Stevens. And Donna DeVerona told me that Ted Stevens was a key to all of this. In 1952, Ted Stevens' law career took him to Fairbanks, Alaska. He was appointed by the Eisenhower administration, U.S. attorney the following year. In 1956, he returned to Washington, D.C., to work in the Interior Department, Eisenhower's Interior Department, and he plays a role in bringing about statehood for Alaska. One thing that I'm always, when I'm talking about this, and when I talk to Donna or Nancy about this, I point out, I said, the 49th state, Alaska, Stevens, the 50th state, Mink, Patsy Mink, were responsible for this. The two states added in 1959, 1960, the catalyst, people from those states, the catalyst for changes. Stevens was elected to the House of Representatives in 1964, became the House Majority Leader in 67. In 68, he decided he was going to run for the Republican nomination for U.S. Senate. He lost, but he was appointed Alaska's junior senator in 1969 when the seat became open. As a senator, he played key roles in the legislation which shaped Alaska's economy and the social development, including the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act, the Trans-Alaska Pipeline Authorization Act, the Alaska National Interest Lands Conservation Act, and the Magnuson-Stevens Fishery Conservation Act and Management Act, along with Title IX. In 1978, he sponsored the American Sports Act, which resulted in the establishment of the United States Olympic Committee and now the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee. The Alaska statehood signed into law by Eisenhower on July 7th, 1958, and Alaska became the 49th state on January the 3rd, 1959. There is Donna Deverona, my buddy Donna, up in Stamford, Connecticut. And this is what when we're putting this thing together, and I left it as it is because this is how Donna sent it to me. Could use some spelling updates, but that's okay. Without Senator Stevens as co-sponsor, I doubt Title IX would have survived. It was a time we needed a strong Republican. He championed the rights of athletes and protected Title IX, as well as always being there when there was a challenge to the law. And there were many challenges to the law through 2007. Why Title IX? Why Ted Stevens? Why Title IX? Well, he was an avid tennis player himself. He had daughters, and he wanted them to play Little League baseball in both Washington and back in Alaska. And he saw that sports and recreation was a good thing in his life and other people he knew and his children's lives. And Title IX would provide women's equality, women's equality in sports. And Donna Deverona told me the worst thing that the lobbyists did when they put together the Title IX legislation was including the word sports. What they should have done, all areas of education in college, because sports became a major problem. Oh, by the way, Donna won 2 gold medals, Tokyo Olympics in 1964. She's as smart as a whip. I mean, she is really, really smart. She wanted to go to Stanford University and was hoping to get a scholarship because she had the 2 gold medals in her back pocket. She was only 17 when she won the medals in 1964. So she's looking for a scholarship. Guess what? No scholarship. She deserved it. If any, she deserved it. Scholarships were not given out for sports to women until about 1974. And there is Harvey Schiller, my friend Harvey, whose Facebook picture last year included his shoulder replacement, the x-ray complete with the screw and the new bone. Ted Stevens in the middle, and there is Donna on the right. I had a teacher in 9th grade. I was up at Spring Valley High School, junior high school in 9th grade. His name was Stewie Gates. And Stewie was a social studies teacher. And he hammered into me things like Red China and Communist China. Stewie is still alive. Up until about 7 years ago, he was fighting fires in Stony Point, New York, until they said, listen, Stewie, you know what, just answer the phones. You don't have to go up on ladders and putting out fires anymore, because he's about 88 years old at the time. Anyway, Stewie Gates gave us a pep talk. Well, maybe not a pep talk. He gave us an encouragement talk in 1969-70. I forgot what part of the year it was, but it was part of that year. And we're in 9th grade, and I'm a year ahead, so I'm 13 years old. Everybody else is 14 years old in the class, because I got thrown out of kindergarten into 1st grade in 1961, which is a long story, because the teachers couldn't handle me. In fact, my 1st grade teacher thought I was trying to take over the class. I don't see why. Well, that's Mrs. Topar's opinion. Anyway, Stewie Gates. So he sits us around and decides to give us this little talk. And he says, you're all in 9th grade, but you're not going to be in 9th grade forever. You're leaving this building in June, and you're going up to Spring Valley High School in September. You'll be in 10th grade. And you're going to take the PSATs. So you'll get an idea of what you can do in school or preparing for the SATs to go to a school. And he said, then in 11th grade, 2 years from now, you take the real SATs. And then 3 years from now, you start looking at colleges and decide what you really want to be. And he says, for all the women in the class, and he's looking at the women in the class, he says, you're probably going to go to college and major in 3 letters. Remember, this is 1969-70. And the 3 letters are going to be MRS. You're going to look for a husband. Birch Bayh, 1972. He's on the floor of the Senate. He's sponsoring the Title IX Act He signed on as a sponsor in the Indiana Democrat, and he's on the floor and he's talking. And there is Birch Bayh, an older picture, a newer picture of him, an older Birch Bayh, and he is talking. And he has these remarks on the Senate floor. And as I was going through this and looking at his remarks, I said, Stewie Gates could have given the same talk on the Senate floor. In his remarks on the Senate floor, Bayh said, we're all familiar with the stereotype that women are pretty things who go to the college to find a husband and who go on to graduate school because they want a more interesting husband, finally married, have children, and never work again. The desire of many schools is not to waste a man's place on a woman stems from such stereotyped notions. But the facts absolutely contradict these myths about the weaker sex. And it's time to change our operating assumptions. While the impact of this amendment would be far-reaching, it's not a panacea. However, it is, however, an important first step in the effort to provide for the women of America something that is rightfully theirs, an equal chance to attend the schools of their choice, to develop the skills they want, and to apply those skills with the knowledge that they will have a fair chance to secure the jobs of their choice with equal pay for equal work. It would pass in June of 1972. Title IX was enacted as a follow-up to the passage of the Civil Rights Act of '64. That was in July of 1964. That act was passed to end discrimination in various fields based on race, color, religion, sex, national origin in the areas of employment and public accommodation. The 1964 Act did not prohibit sexual discrimination against persons employed at educational institutions. For instance, my friend Fran, she got an explanation as to why she wasn't taken out of college. But most women, if they wanted an explanation, couldn't get it. Oh, if you're a professor and looking for tenure and you ask why you didn't get tenure, they didn't have to tell you. You just didn't get tenure. Student athletes were denied equal opportunities. Under the law in academics, women applicants were routinely denied access to medical, law, and other graduate schools. Women athletes denied equal participation in sports. Faculty members, women faculty members were denied equal compensation and promotion. Today's rise of women in all academic disciplines and in sports at every level in many ways is a direct outgrowth of the landmark Title IX legislation. Congress would finish up the bill in June of '72. Nixon would sign it, yes I did, on June 23rd. There have been many times in the almost 50 years now when it's been challenged. Title IX has gone back to Congress many more times than most other laws, 24 times by 2007. The last assault on Title IX was by the Educational Secretary Rod Brooks under George W. Bush, when he sent out an email to virtually every college student in the country saying, do we still need Title IX or can we get rid of Title IX? People like Donna DeVerona jumped at him and others saying, you can't do this. And the other problem is now, how many women lawyers are there that would take on this case and just say, just to defend Title IX? I know two of them, at least two of them that would. He signed the bill. He signed the bill. There he is. When Dick Nixon signed the bill, and he signs the bill, and that's that, he doesn't talk about it. Doesn't mention that he just potentially changed the lives of every woman in the United States under the age of 18 and those who are in college at the time who want graduate degrees. There were, let me say this, there were women who were highly accomplished. I met one of them, Rosalind Yallow, in 1978. I was interviewing her because she won the Nobel Prize. You have seen Hidden Figures with Katherine Johnson. My friend Dick Hull, who now lives near Cape Canaveral, Cape Kennedy, worked for NASA between 1960 and 1975. And Katherine Johnson's supposed to be one of those hidden figures. He said, that's misleading. She was never hidden. Everybody knew about her and the other women there. They went to traditional Black schools where they excelled. traditional white schools, the traditional black colleges, the everyday white schools, well, look, there were quotas in the Ivy League. Women really couldn't go to Ivy League schools except during World War II. I knew a woman who went to Columbia during World War II because they didn't have enough men around to fill the classes. That's Bernice Guerra. She was a baseball umpire in 1972, and she was one of the 1960s women who was bored being a housewife, like the women who were quoted in Betty Friedan's book, The Feminine Mystique. And she's talking to her husband one night and was saying, I want to do something more than just sit around the house and open up Chef Boyardee or Rice-A-Roni. There's got to be more to life. What can I do? Well, they sat down and they talked. And well, what do you like? I like baseball. And the husband says, well, become a baseball umpire. She did. She went to umpiring school. And by 1969, she was good enough that she received the contract to work minor league baseball games. She got a contract from the National Association of Professional Baseball Leagues, Class A short season New York Penn League. And she's all set to go, but wait 1 minute, not so fast. Guerra received the telegram from the then NAPBL president, Philip Peyton, saying, contract disapproved, it's invalid, go home. She did not go home. She decided to sue. And 3 years later, she won. And she got the right to be on the field as a minor league baseball umpire. That was June 24th, 1972. And she umpired a game between the Class A New York Penn League teams, the Geneva Rangers and the Auburn Phillies in upstate New York. The New York Penn League no longer exists. Major League Baseball put them out of business last September or October. Anyway, so she goes up to stay at the hotel near Geneva, near Auburn, and she is greeted by pickets in front of the hotel. Go home. Your place is in the home, not behind the home plate. And so immediately she sees this thing is not working out all that well with all these pickets. Why are they picketing me? They're just picketing her. So they picked her. She is getting no support from her fellow umpires or umpire. There are only two on the field in the New York Penn League. And she's behind the plate is a double play call. And you got one guy roaming the field and she's behind home plate. And she reversed the double play call. And the manager of the Auburn Phillies was a guy by the name of Nolan Campbell. And Nolan Campbell comes out and starts screaming at her, typical baseball umpire manager confrontation. And one of the choice things he said, you should be in the kitchen peeling potatoes. The other umpire, generally the other umpire comes to try to quell the situation and cool it down and kind of get the manager away from the umpire. He was just standing and watching. He wasn't helping out. It was a double header, and she decided to quit in between games of the first and second game, but she did get on the field, and she did continue a career in baseball. She was community relations director for the New York Mets after this incident. So this incident, which would have turned me off baseball for good, or any occupation for good, didn't faze her. She continued in baseball. Back in the 1980s, my father-in-law used to come out with me when I went to these events. And it's a good thing he did, because I can use those pictures today. That's Billie Jean King. I don't want an action picture of Billie Jean King. I just want a comfortable picture of Billie Jean King. That's at the 21 Club at some function. I don't remember the function. But it started my relationship with Billie Jean King and speaking to her. And I'll tell you one thing about Billie Jean King. I really like her. She's honest. She's as honest as the day is long. She will tell you what's on her mind. And she's a genuinely nice person. She really is a nice person, but she's as tough as nails. I have enjoyed my interactions with Billie Jean King over the years. You know what? She's a civil rights pioneer. Whether you agree with me or not, I'm not changing my mind. She's a civil rights pioneer in a different sense. She fought for women's rights in the 1960s. And I remember in the 1960s, there was the civil rights movement, which started with Randolph back in 1941, and then Rosa Parks and Billie Jean King. There was the women's lib movement, women's rights movement, Betty Friedan, Gloria Steinem, Judith Merlo, and a whole bunch of other people. Billie Jean King was not part of it, but was part of it. The gay and lesbian rights movement started in 1969. The American Indian movement started in 1968 over in Ireland. The Catholics and the Protestants and the war that broke out between Northern Ireland and Ireland. So a lot of things were going on in the 60s. Billie Jean King was a pioneer. She did that silly battle of the sexes thing at the Houston Astrodome against Bobby Riggs in 1973, which my friend Shelley put together. And I'll tell you more about that in a few minutes. So Patsy Mink is getting into the congressional gym. Patsy Mink and Edith Green become friendly, and they start the ball rolling to get some equal rights. There's the Civil Rights Act. In 1965, the Voters' Rights Act, and there are two percolating. One, the Equal Rights Amendment, which would finally get through the Senate in 1972, along with Title IX, which got through in 1972. Billie Jean King, her world was women stuck in old traditions, going to Wimbledon, and she's Mrs. King, and there was Mrs. Cord and Miss Goolagong and all that other stuff. They didn't have first names, just like the woman in Riverdale didn't have first names. Treated like second-class citizens. And Billie Jean King, who learned tennis on the streets in the San Francisco Bay Area, just like Jimmy Connors learned tennis on the streets in East St. Louis, Illinois, decided she wasn't going to put up with this, that she was going to make a difference. 1967, she took on the United States Lawn Tennis Association and the policy of paying top players under the table so they would be in tournaments. She denounced the USLTA's practices as corrupt, keeping the game highly elitist, and they were just looking for a chance to punish her for taking them on. 1968, she talked about, she only won 750 pounds for winning Wimbledon. The Australian tennis player Rod Laver got 2,000 pounds. The purses for men and women, and people were coming out to watch both at Wimbledon, 14,800 pounds for men, 5,680 for women. At the Italian Open in 1970, Ilie Nastase was paid $3,500 for winning the tournament, while Billie Jean King got $600. Things are coming to a head, though. She's complaining about money and she's complaining about conditions, and the USLTA, you know what, we can't deal with this anymore. We're not dealing with it. And you know what? We're going to punish you and we're going to show you we mean business. There are going to be no tournaments for you in 1970, and you need tournaments to get into the majors, which is the Australian, the French, Wimbledon, and the US Open. So if you can't play in there, you can't play in those tournaments. I'm jumping ahead here just a bit, and I'm going to jump back. She continued her push for equal prize money. After winning 1972, the US Open in Forest Hills, she was paid 15 grand less than Nastase, and said, hey, you know what? I'm not coming back here if you don't equal the prize money for women. They did in Forest Hills, and the US Open became the first major tournament to offer equal prize money for men and women. As I said, tennis is probably as well established a global sport as any in the world except for soccer. The 4 major championships, there are separate tours for men and women. That could end soon because the men and women are thinking about maybe we should consolidate and mix it up a little bit, having both men and women playing in the same tour, not against each other, but as part of the package. They're talking about that now. You've come a long way, baby, to get to where you are today. You've got your own cigarette now, baby. You've come a long way. It was a 1969 campaign by Philip Morris. I was giving a talk at the Ridgefield Library up in Connecticut 2 years ago, and the woman, I was talking about the calendar year 1969, and the woman said to me, we're talking about the Virginia Slims campaign. She says, yeah, I was never a smoker. I was not interested in smoking, but I love the commercials. Why? They were talking to me. It wasn't as if I was putting arrow wax on the floor and cleaning a floor, or putting end dust on a table and cleaning a table, or using a whisk for laundry detergent. It was talking to me as a woman, not as a housewife whose job was to clean up. And it was effective, even though I didn't agree with the product. In 1970, there are no tennis tournaments for women, but there was a guy in Houston who decided, yeah, let's have a tennis tournament. And he got Virginia Slims to put up money for, or Philip Morris to put up money for that tournament, and that would become the basis of the World Tennis Association Tour. There were 9 players who played, and they were called the Original Nine. And they rebelled against the United States Lawn Tennis Association because of the money situation. The 9, Billie Jean King, Rosie Casals, Nancy Ritchie, Peaches Barkowitz, Kirsty Pigeon, Valerie Ziegenfuss, Julie Heldman, Carrie Melville Reed, and Judy Taggart Dalton. All of them put their careers at risk because they were told, if you play here, you'll never play another tennis match anywhere. And Billie Jean King and Rosie Casals and Nancy Ritchie basically said, I dare you. I dare you. And they won the dare. But as far as the women's tennis tour, nobody was knocking on their door to give them any money. As Billie Jean King said, that they went to Madison Avenue and they knocked on every door, as nobody answered. And if they did answer and they saw that it was them, they slammed the door shut, except for that one company, Philip Morris. They had the cigarette that they wanted to reach women with. And they put up the money to get the Virginia Slims tour up and going. Billie Jean King did tell me one day it was blood money. It was blood money because the Surgeon General in 1964 said that smoking could kill you. In 1983, Billie Jean King is approached by protesters in a tournament in Boston. She's already in her 40s, but she's still part of it. And she was asked, why'd you take the money? Why'd you take the money? Why'd you take Virginia Slim's money? And she said, I believe in the free enterprise system. It's up to the woman herself to make that choice, whether to smoke or not smoke. The most important thing is that we're well informed and that we make our own decision. Ellen Merlo, who is the director of marketing and communications for Philip Morris USA, which made the Virginia Slim cigarette, said that, yeah, the company did sponsor the tour from 71 to 78, but she threw in this proviso. When we get involved in any promotion, it's obviously to create a greater visibility for our brand name, but we never ever asked the player to endorse our product. Well, you did. By having them play in the tour with all the signage around, with all the paraphernalia that says Virginia Slims on it, you did. You did ask them for an endorsement. You just didn't ask the player to come out and talk about Virginia Slims. But every other wrapping in this thing had Virginia Slims all over the place. Brandy Chastain, I interviewed her in 2008, and subsequently, she was part of the 1999 United States women's soccer team that won the World Cup. And we were talking about the difficulties that women's sports had in the United States and how money was a problem and always was a problem. And she had a very simple solution to the whole thing. We need a good old girls network. How do you get a good old girls network? Well, girls have to be educated. Prior to 1972, very few girls were educated enough to become CEOs. Now, Lucille Ball was a CEO in the 1960s and the most powerful woman in Hollywood as far as TV was concerned. But she got the company, Desi Liu, because of a divorce from Desi Arnaz. But she took her job seriously, far more seriously than the TV shows that she was on. She decided that she was going to be the one making decisions at Desi Liu. And she's the one who brought Star Trek to life when everybody else told her, forget about it. It's too expensive. Nobody wants it. Forget about it. And twice it was rejected by NBC. And she put up another pilot and then NBC took it. She was tough. She had Manic, she had That Girl, she had the Lucy Show, she had Mission Impossible. She may have been one of the 5 most powerful women in the United States in the 1960s, not because of the screwball character that she portrayed on TV, but because of her ability behind the business desk. Oh, Billie Jean King told me this as well. Some of you may remember this. She couldn't get a credit card unless her husband, Larry King is a different Larry King than the guy that was asking meatball questions on TV, something that he admitted to. Many banks require, Billie Jean King, she couldn't get a credit card unless Larry King signed, her father signed, her brother signed, or her boyfriend or some other guardian signed, because banks didn't trust women. Many banks required single, divorced, or widowed women to bring a man along with them to co-sign for a credit card. Some of the credit was discounted by 50% when calculating women's credit card limits. 1974, the Senate passed the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, which made it illegal to discriminate against someone based on their gender, race, religion, national origin. There have been over the years some women who have told me that despite it all, they did get credit cards, generally with department stores, and generally they were giving a credit card after they became a nuisance, as one woman told me, that they kept saying, I want a credit card. And she eventually got one. Another person got one because she knew a banker who liked her, so he got her a credit card, which meant that banks should open just for women, right? And there was a bank that opened just for women. In 1975, the first women's bank was opened. Judy H. Mello, who came out of the Betty Friedan, Gloria Steinem, and Bella Abzug wing of the women's liberation movement. The first women's bank. The bank was a creation of the feminist movement. It opened in April 1975, the first bank in the United States to be operated by women for women, at a time when the founders said that the women were given short shrifts by other banks. By 1986, the first women's bank really wasn't needed anymore. It was languishing and was sold to a group of investors, and they folded it into their bank portfolio. But as recently as 9 years ago, a report found that women still paid more for credit cards. According to a study, the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority, women pay in 2012, paid a half-point higher interest rate than men. Title IX opened the door for women in sports and other fields, including medicine and the law. Title IX bars sexual discrimination in any educational program or activity that receives federal funding, including athletics, and that was the problem. There is Birch Bayh, later on in his life, running with the University of Purdue track and field team, the women's track team in Indiana, his home state. Getting back to Title IX and Donna Deverona. Title IX was a Civil Rights Act applied to education. She continues to be involved in the fight, and she continues to make sure I understand what's going on. She's vigilant in making sure Title IX doesn't get watered down in any way. And here's the problem. She said, basically it was said in law school, medical school, sports was thrown in. Sports should never have been thrown in because they never would have faced all the problems that they have faced because of sports. And there were lawsuits against it. They were all done by 1977. All the lawsuits by men saying, this is ruining not only women's sports, but ruining education. You're taking a man's place. What are we supposed to do? By 1977, they were all out the window. At the inception, opponents of the law argued that girls and women were not interested in elite sports participation, and that opening up new opportunities would not only undermine American or men's sports, but bankrupt school sports budgets nationally. And that's John Tower. He was a senator from Texas, and he decides that it's time to repeal Title IX almost 2 years after Richard Nixon signs it into law. May 20th, 1974, the Tower Amendment, which would exempt revenue-producing sports such as football, because that was the only thing producing revenue, from the determinations of the Title IX compliance. The amendment is rejected. But this is what happened. Even though the amendment was rejected, there became widespread misunderstanding about Title IX. It's got to be a sports equity law. That's what it became, perceived perception. People heard about it, and they perceived some perception about this law. But really, this law was anti-discrimination. It was a civil rights law. Jacob Javits, the Republican liberal senator from New York, he too jumped on the anti-women bandwagon in a way. He submitted an amendment directing the Health, Education, and Welfare Department to issue regulations which provide for reasonable provisions considering the nature of particular sports, football, 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 that clarifies that event and uniform expenditures on sports with larger crowds and more expensive equipment do not have to be matched in sports without similar needs. Hey, there's the girls' softball team. Well, you know what? Oh, that shirt that you bought, yeah, keep wearing it. That's okay. And yeah, the shorts look fine. You know, why would we spend money on things like uniforms for women? Walter Byers. Walter Byers in the 1950s became the head of the president of the National Collegiate Athletic Association, and he came up with the term student athletes. His job, protect students. Well, that's what his job is supposed to be. His job really is to protect colleges because, I'll give you an instance, in 1955, there was a football player by the name of Ray Dennison, played at Fort Lewis A&M in Colorado, and on the opening kickoff of a game, he died on the field from injuries suffered on the play. The family decided to sue, and Walter Byers came up with this term student athletes, which means they're students. They're not possibly taking compensation from the colleges. So student athlete, which is a dodge. They're not workers here. And the judge agreed with Walter Byers. And there was no compensation after the death of Ray Dennison, except Ray Dennison has a stadium named after him now, all these years later. But it was Walter Byers who really was not looking out for the best interests of student athletes. February 17th, 1976, the NCAA challenges the legality of Title IX. Why? Saving college football. He didn't get anywhere with it. Title IX has changed how college sports played in the country. Before 1972, the U.S. General Accounting Office released a figure showing that 32,000 women had participated in college sports. More than a generation and a half later, that grew to 163,000 by 1999. Men no longer get 95% of the dollars earmarked for sports, which caused friction in the men's teams coaching fraternity. A good many of those men who are coaches think that Title IX has taken away their ability to get the best athletes for their teams because they can't spend scholarship money for men's teams. Men's programs have been eliminated, but oddly enough, again, Title IX was never meant to level out the college sports playing field and give women sports opportunities. The original intent was to give women a fair chance at being accepted in a school and for women professors to get equal opportunities at advancing within the system. Has Title IX worked? Well, let's take a look at the numbers. A generation later, 22 years later, women receive 38% of medical degrees earned in the United States, only 9% in 1972. More women today are in medical school than men in the United States. 43% of law degrees, 1994, given to women, compared to just 7% in 1972. Today, more women are in law school than men. And this is kind of a murky statistic. Because it's from 1977, and it could be people who started their doctorate degrees in 1969. But anyway, 1977, 44%, right, 25% of people getting degrees in 1977, and that could include people past Title IX who were, say juniors in college in 1972. 25% got doctorates in 77 compared to 49% by 1994. So it was a diversity in society law. Nixon changed the lives of a lot of people, because women no longer were told, hey, become a nurse, become a teacher, become a secretary, become a telephone operator. Not a piece of sports legislation. And there is my friend Shelley Saltman. That was in Los Angeles a little over 5 years ago, one of the 5 most influential men in women's sports in 1970. It had a lot to do with the battle of the sexes, the Billie Jean King, Bobby Riggs match in 1973 that Billie Jean King said all those years later to me, what was I doing? I challenged him, but if he beats me, I lose to a 55-year-old man. If I beat him, I beat a 55-year-old man. But she said that at the time, Title IX was in its infancy, and something she needed to protect the image of women. He being Bobby Riggs, beat Margaret Court. He issued the challenge, and she took the challenge on behalf of women. She said she did not want to see all of the advances, which included Title IX. The one that didn't advance, of course, was the Equal Rights Amendment. She didn't want to see them rolled back. Prior to 1972, there were very few women lawyers, doctors, scientists. I knew one, Rosalind Yalow, who won the Nobel Award in physics. More or less nurse, teacher, secretary career for most women. High school counselors basically told women, nurse, teacher, secretary. They didn't tell women, go to law school, go to medical school, become an engineer. They didn't really tell them that. And I know that because I've spoken to people who graduated high school prior to 1972 and after 1972. And there is a marked difference between those 2 years, 72 and 73. Girls didn't play too many sports. Without Title IX, there'd be no Jeannie Finch, no World Cup soccer team, no WNBA, no Misty May trainer, Kerry Walsh, Lindsey Vonn. Virtually every female athlete from the Little League level. New Jersey was the first to allow girls to play Little League baseball in 1973. From the Little League level to college sports has benefited from Title IX one way or another. And of course, you could say the same thing about women scientists. Remember, women are working on the COVID-19 vaccine. Women worked on getting that craft up to the spacecraft up to Mars. Mathematicians or computer analysts. So if you take nothing away from this other than me talking forever, you got to understand this. Women need to know that education is not a right. It's guaranteed through a federal law, and there's some provisions. It still needs to be addressed, including violence against women on college campuses, which is still a wide open gap in the Title IX, as Nancy Hogshead has told me. That needs to be tightened up a lot, and Nancy is working on that to see if it's all tightened up. Thank you, Don Eller. Thank you for attending, and the floor is all yours now. I am talked out.
Great presentation.
Thank
Let
you.
me unmute everyone. I was emailing you, Evan, about maybe a Lucille Ball presentation. I just emailed you.
I could do that. I have enough from the television, but somebody who would know TV would know that a lot better than me. And I could tackle it, of course.
I know you can.
Yeah, but you know, most people don't know that about Lucy. They're in shock. What? But it's true. I mean, she actually sold the company for $17 million at the height of all the programs that were on there to what we affectionately called Engulf and Devour, Gulf and Western. And she got out of the business. And I don't know, how old was she when she got out? She wasn't that old when she got out. She didn't want to do it anymore, but she went to bat for Star Trek. She knew Mission Impossible was going to be a hit. She put Marlo Thomas on with that girl, Mannix, and they had a whole bunch of shows. So I could talk about Lucille Ball, the businesswoman.
Okay, yeah, okay. We'll talk later. But does anyone have any questions about Evan's presentation? Yeah.
Or comments?
No question, but a thank you. I learned an awful lot. Pretty amazing.
You know, one thing, I did this talk 3 years ago over in Whippany at the JCC in Whippany. And there was this woman who came out and we're going to the parking lot. She said, I want to talk to you for a second. I said, sure. She said, I want to tell you about my daughter. She went to whatever the high school is by Whippany, Parsippany, somewhere around there, back in 1973, after Title IX was passed. And she was telling me that her daughter had sprained her ankle or something. She was, yeah, Cookie, we've come a long way, baby, to get to where we are today. You got your own cigarette now, baby. Anyway, so she's telling me that her daughter hurt her knee or her ankle or whatever, and that she hurt it while she was playing, I think she was playing basketball, and that she wanted to use the whirlpool in the high school. And they said, well, yeah, you could use it, but it's really for the boys. I said, what do you mean it's really for the boys? Oh, it's really for the boys. And so she said, well, can she use it? She said, well, yeah, you got to come in at 5:30 in the morning. She could use it. 5:30 in the morning? 5:30, school starts at 8 o'clock. 5:30, what? Why 5:30? And she said that they went to court, and her daughter got access to the whirlpool, that there was designated times for the boys and the girls, and whatever, Whippany, wherever that was over there off of 287. And so she said, we had to fight to get my daughter treatment, or we would have taken her somewhere else. But she said, even with Title IX, and she said, the other thing she said to me, so why are you wasting this talk on old people like us? We went through it. You should talk to 15-year-olds about it. She's probably right.
I
Thank you,
listened because my daughter, who's really interested in women's rights, is too busy, so I'll have to tell her about it.
Well, she can watch it.
Well, we recorded it, Bernadette, so I'll send you the
Great.
recording.
I will. I think she will watch it.
Yeah, I'm gonna post it on our YouTube channel. Well, thanks, Evan, as
Yeah, so I'm
always.
just as Bernadette, so you enjoyed the talk.
Very much. Thank you.
Oh,
Thank you.
And I missed the beginning, so I'm glad you recorded it.
right.
Yeah, thank you, Evan. It's always great.
Yeah.
The
Thank you very
beginning is
much.
about
Very interesting.
1972. So some stories in there that you might enjoy. So
All right,
Anyway.
take care, everyone.
thank
Oh,
you
go
for
ahead, Evan.
inviting me. And my name is Evan Weiner. Stay safe. I got my first shot. So one of these days I'll be out of, free to roam again, the earth again. So anyway, have a good week, and we turn the clocks ahead. So you got one less hour this weekend.